The more technological platforms that you have access to, your attack surface is getting increased.
Your biggest vulnerability is not the complex attack, it's downtime.
We still have a lot of organizations reacting rather than being proactive or actively responding to fraud scenarios.
There has to be more awareness towards the different ways that little piece of technology that you're making use of can ultimately cost you.
Think about it as a car having two engines, and something goes wrong with the one engine. The other engine is still at full capacity.
You need to leverage on your data for insights. One of the things you need to understand is
as digital payments be on the rise, we're seeing likewise increase in fraud cases, right? It goes from identity theft, phishing, insider threats, systems collapse, name it. It's been a constant battle between good and evil. But there's a way, and that's why we're discussing fraud solutions and how businesses and individuals can stay ahead of the game. Today, I'll be your host, and with me are industry legends. I can call them very interesting and brilliant minds. Andrew from Penguin Solutions, Muiwa of Stanbic IBTC. I'm sure you'll have an engaging conversation. How are you doing today, Muiwa?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning.
And how are you doing, Andrew?
All good, Patrick. Thanks a lot.
Let's just dive right into it. I'm so excited to be discussing this with you because this is a subject close to heart because I've had experience of loss by someone very close to me and really getting involved to help them out. Muiwa, over to you. Tell me, from your perspective in the banking industry, I know you've been here for quite a while. What are the most pressing fraud cases that you're seeing today? How is it affecting your customers and institutions like yours? Tell us.
Okay, so I'd say top as of now, insider threats, social engineering, and then identity theft as well. Insider threats due to the fact that you have a lot of internal collision going on in terms of having your own employees devising different types of schemes just to be able to derive whatever type of gain it is from your customers, so to speak. So you need to keep that in mind. No one knows you as much as the people that occupy the same environment as you in terms of workspace. A lot of identity theft related fraud as well. I'll speak mostly to communication applications or social media platforms because there's been a huge adoption of those platforms, right, in our environment today. WhatsApp groups, WhatsApp chats, most especially. There are instances of people, compromising WhatsApp platforms and requesting for all manner of, it could be money, it could be support or whatever. You would think you're interacting with someone that you know, and of course, you're sending out money without knowing that person's account has actually been compromised. And now what makes it easier is the angle of social engineering, because you just have people with so much information online that it's easy for me to be able to build a profile about you without ever meeting you. And by the time I'm trying to lure you into something that will lead to you getting defrauded, I have so much personal information about you that I'm speaking to you like I've known you, or I could be typing to you like I've known you for years. So those are just some of the things I see.
Wow. Sometimes if I'm not experiencing this, I would have been very scared, right? I hear news every day of people defrauded, or on some social media platforms, you see cases where people are trying to get personal information like date of birth. It's out there. You just see different dates. Tell us your date of birth. Today we are celebrating September, people. What's your date? And the person will falsely say, I'm September X. And people start following. Hey, you see my birthday mate, and they're collecting personal information. And that's how they build profiles for people. And you think you're talking to the right person. Thank you, Muiwa. That was quite interesting. And Andrew, wow. we've heard organizations investing tons of dollars into fraud solutions and trying to build a defense against the sophistication of those tactics. However, we know that downtime can create a bottleneck into being able to respond or react to fraud. Right? Tell us about what Penguin Solutions have put in place to uniquely provide adequate responses to failures due to systems collapse and outages.
Well, when it comes down to fraud detection, your biggest vulnerability is not the complex attack, it's downtime. So when you think about HA or AI availability, there's still some time, it takes time to recover. There's some downtime still. So that's where fault tolerance from Penguin Solution comes into play, where we actually run a dual same server and it's running on both ends. So when one goes down, the other one is still running the same information and it's still a running uptime. So that we see that any type of downtime is the gap where there could be some fraud.
So tell me, interesting, you're saying fault tolerance, you're saying that there are two systems running at the same time?
Yes.
So you mean one of them goes down and
the other one's still right?
So tell me, how's this different from high availability?
High availability still needs to kick in, right? It's more of a backup. So you have to still wait for the services to actually boot up. It's not running two active instances at the same time.
Wow. So your recommendation is organizations who wants to prevent fraud 24 hours, 7 days a week needs to build in fault tolerant systems.
Well, it needs to be resilient foundation, right? The resilient foundation means that the power is always on. And you don't have any skip you're not blinking, or equipment is not blinking. It's actually just running consistently.
Wow, interesting. Because I know fraud prevention leverages on a lot of rules, but if there are no systems to process those rules, then literally, what fraud are we preventing?
Yes.
Interesting. Thank you. Back to you, Mwewan. Fraud detection often struggle with gaps in people, processes, technology. You see some fashionable tag like people process technology. Yeah. But where do you see the biggest vulnerabilities right now in the global banking landscape or payment landscape?
Okay. So, one of the biggest problems is with the widespread adoption of technology, right? And with every form of technology advancement that is introduced, generally, people tend to forget that, or it might not even be about being forgetful. It could just be about not just having that information, right? With the more endpoints that you have access to, or whatever, the more technological platforms that you have access to, your attack surface is getting increased. A lot of people do not even know that you could have, you could get yourself compromised from a digital information standpoint, not just with your mobile phone. It could even be devices such as your Apple Watch, and just using that as an instance. So it's a problem. I think there has to be more awareness towards the different ways that little piece of technology that you're making use of can ultimately cost you. And also in terms of the systems that are being deployed by various financial institutions, a lot of them are detective systems, are not necessarily preventive systems, right? And there needs to be a shift, right, to preventing rather than just detecting, because that ensures a proactive approach. Then for the people, fraud systems, due to the amount of information that they have to sieve through every time as they function, you've discovered that you have a lot of alerts that you need to attend to, right? So that's where you need to ensure that you tune things to the point where your people are dealing with at least a number of alerts that they can ultimately make informed decisions about.
All right. When we talked about gadgets, right? I just looked at myself. I can imagine how many gadgets that I have on, right? And it's quite amazing how one of my gadgets can be responsible for a loss, right? People carry on contactless these days, and you see different applications trying to copy data, right? There's one of the things I noticed recently. I was trying to copy, and the app was notifying me that this app is trying to take this data, and I'm like, no, no, hell no, hell no. Or is it recently? I was talking to someone, and next thing I heard on the background that the person has turned on call recording, and I told the person, right, you know that it's really wrong by law to record a conversation without the person's permission. And I felt like, oh, I'm sorry. I said, if you wanted a record, right, you could have asked for your voice notes, and I would be willing to give you a voice note. It's still my voice, right? And these are tiny little details that people don't pay attention to, because you can as well just give out information without literally knowing what's on the other side or not paying attention. And so I liked the fact that you pointed to gadget. I'll be more careful myself next time. Right? So you, Andrew, this is quite interesting. Beyond uptime, right? Someone might say, "Oh, I'm in cloud. I'm deploying across multiple zones." Yeah, but right, a cloud is a physical data center somewhere, right? How does Penguin Solutions safeguard sensitive financial information, especially fraud-sensitive environments beyond uptime?
I mean, this is a critical point, right? Uptime is meaningless if the data is wrong, right? So Stratus platform safeguards the data as well. So think about it in this way, right? So you've got two scribes. Now, if the two scribes are writing at the same time in two different separate books, and the one scribe's pen, the ink runs out, that's a hardware failure. The other scribe still captures, and it's actually captured in real time, right? So you've got correct data, you've got the information is correct, and it's actually captured before even that happened. So that, from a Penguin perspective, that's why fault tolerance and uptime is so critical, right? So that you can have accurate data. The other thing is where data goes missing is if you don't have fault tolerant and there's a failure at the write cycle where data is being written. So again, if the second scribe is already written in the book, it means that you've already captured that. And that's why it's so important to have fault tolerant and high availability.
Interesting, right? And I like the way you're couching it, and I like to understand more. Right? This is now beyond uptime. You're saying, right? Even your data is protected. Because I mean, you talked about high availability the last time, that there's still a switch time, right? But you're saying there's no switch.
Mm-mm. It's real time.
It's real time, and my data is still available.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it as a car having two engines, right? So if something goes, so you're driving along, and something goes wrong with a one engine, the other engine is still at full capacity. So the car doesn't even slow down, right? That is true fault tolerance, right? Where high availability, the car is going to go break down, stop and wait for it for the other engine maybe to start on. That's not true fault tolerance.
Fantastic, and that means that the fraud rules keep applying.
But the point is the data is protected. There's no data loss, right? Which is quite critical in terms of fraud specifically, because that's an opportunity as well to have fraud where there's some data loss.
Wow, interesting, and I like that. So you're saying 100% uptime, no data loss. That's a crown jewel on it.
Yes.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, today, industry numbers are staggering, right? There are billions of transactions processed monthly, and the banks are biggest contributors to these daily transaction volumes. How do you balance minimizing false positives? You talked about the alert burnout, right? The number of alerts. So how do you balance this false positive, picking on your comments, right, while catching the real guys, the bad guys?
So you need to leverage on your data, right, for insights. One of the things you need to understand is whatever fraud monitoring approach it is that you're You could adopt a rule-based methodology to say, configure rules across your systems. And today, there's a huge shift towards artificial intelligence-based fraud monitoring solutions. Those ones take fraud monitoring to another extent where it's making use of extra parameters to make decisions on whether a transaction or activity seem fraudulent or not. So you need to make sure that whatever it is you're doing, you are consistently reviewing and fine tuning your rules, making use of the data that you have. And I mean fraud data, because there really isn't no one size fits all approach to monitoring across different organizations. You need to ensure that whatever fraud systems it is that you are putting in place, you are configuring your rules in line with what it is that you can see that is happening in-house, which is what your data will provide to you.
Fantastic, right? I like that. Experience, right? A couple of years ago, I had at the end I was happy, where it started as a frustration. I moved geographical locations, and then in a few hours, my payment card was declining. So I called my bank, and I'm like, "What's wrong? What's happening? My transactions are failing. I can't pay." And the person on the other side says, "Dear sir, I'm sorry. Where are you right now?" I gave them my physical location, and they were like, they noticed that my location changed in 6 hours, right? And they were not sure if I was the one. So proactively, at first it started as frustration, but when they explained to me, I was like, right, this has gone beyond just rule. It's artificial intelligence. Probably they've looked at the locations to take a decision, and this is fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Right, everyone has a time budget. I hear that all the time. I'm sorry. I have to say that to my bosses. I hope they hear this, right? But worst case, right? Some organizations are hesitant to invest in, and they literally don't understand between what high availability is compared to fault tolerance. They might feel that it's too expensive, right? How does Penguin Solutions make resilience achievable even without this kind of required budgets?
Yeah, look, it's a very common and valid concern, right? But again, it comes down to total cost, right? And if you look at Penguin in terms of total cost, there's three things that to consider, which is important to customers, right? No expensive extra software, right? Because the software already comes included in the fault tolerance system. So you don't have to double licensing. No complex configurations required. It comes out of the box, quite simple to manage. No need for specialized staff. It's simple to set up. You don't need training. You don't need expensive resourcing. And then if you look at the uptime and the fault tolerance by itself, so by the first time where a customer actually experiences fault tolerance, it actually pays itself back. So there's no downtime. If you think about the reputation, if you think about fines, penalties, and fines in terms of compliance, all of those things is quite expensive. Downtime is also expensive. And if you don't have downtime, that first downtime that you don't experience, it's already paying itself back.
Great stuff. And you laid it simple, right? And I kind of caught it when you said the total cost of ownership. Because if you're running high availability, you need to run the same software stack across board. And you're saying with fault tolerance, it's one software. Interesting. It's one software. The same staff, right?
Yeah, look, I think critically people, and that's the difference between HA and fault tolerance, right? The misconception. Now, Fraudsters has got one server, but you've got a duplication in one server. You've got two servers running in one, and it's active. where the comparison normally comes in high availability. Now you have to have two of each, right? So two of each, two software of each. And again, HA is much more complex in terms of configuration. And the downside is you need to wait for it first to boot up, the applications to boot up. And that's, again, you can't afford that if you're running fraud detection, if you're running payment systems. And again, that's where the return of investment is.
Wow, fantastic. I like the way you made it very, very simple so people understand that there's quite a big difference between high availability and fault tolerance, and that's where you see the cost optimization. So with what you're saying, you literally could be spending more in high availability without knowing it. Wow, thank you very much. We were right. We still have a lot of organizations reacting, right, rather than being proactive or actively responding to fraud scenarios, right? How are you personally pushing for more preventive fraud cases or proactive fraud prevention rather than waiting until the losses happen? Because we see a lot of security springing up after people have lost money. You're sending out notifications to say, oh, XYZ has lost amount of money. How do we make sure, from your perspective as an individual, to make sure that we're more proactive rather than being reactive?
Information is key, right? You need to keep your fingers on the pulse. You need to understand what is happening from the cybersecurity threat landscape. And it goes beyond just having that understanding. You also need to sensitize your customers as well. And also, I think a lot of financial institutions suffer from this, right? You need to make sure that you earn the trust of your customers, because if you do not earn the trust of your customers, there's no way they take whatever set of additional measure you're giving to them. There's no way they take it serious. I think I'm of the opinion that awareness matters a lot in terms of improving whatever fraud prevention measures it is that you have in place. Taking it off from there too, you need to also understand that from the technology side of things, applications that you are creating for the purpose of payments or whatever has to be easy to use, right? Usability has to be balanced with adequate security as well as business. The more easy your products are, your customer, or more the likelihood that they're going to use it. So earn their trust and make sure that you make things easy for them ultimately.
It's not going to be so difficult for them to react, or will I say, we'll make it very easy for them to respond to fraud cases. And I like the way you talked about awareness. This is quite fantastic. Andrew, right? In his earlier response, he talked about dynamic fraud prevention and artificial intelligence, and I was just waiting for the right experience that he shared right now. and he shares to you, right? Fraud detection is increasingly powered by AI. I talked about the tons and tons of investments payment companies, financial institutions are pouring into fraud detection systems and tech, right? AI, machine learning isn't going away because it's the future of survival because of the false positives Noah talked about and the evolving landscape. How does solutions from Penguin ensure that there is reliability and accuracy while enabling artificial intelligence?
So, I mean, absolutely in the fight, you can't blink, right? And again, the key is that our systems don't recover from a failure and that they stay on, right? That is the key. So think of it as having a co-pilot and a backup pilot, right? So if you look at HA, that's more like a backup pilot. So when there's something wrong with the plane or there's something wrong with the pilot, there's some delay before the backup pilot can take over, right? But if you think about the fault tolerance or the Penguin solutions, so the pilot would sit right next to the other pilot. They would be in-synchronize. And if something goes wrong on the one side, the other pilot already has a handle on it, right? So if you think about those two type of scenarios, that is basically from a Stratus platform and also then from a HA availability. This means your fraud solutions are truly, right, always online, which is critical. And I think we spoke about it in the previous questions as well. With fraud, any second off is an opportunity, right? That is what it comes down to. So if you've got a resilient platform and you build your fraud systems on top of that, it means that you constantly are looking at fraud prevention and detection.
Tell me a little bit more about it, right? So if I enable AI, because AI really, besides the availability and the uptime, AI requires some heavy processing,
Yes.
right? So moving away from the banking side has deployed quite an intensive fraud prevention system that is state of the art and it's AI enabled. How will Penguin Solutions support that?
Well, I mean, it's the service and the application, right? That sits on the edge on the edge of the data center, right? So that application, if it is a fraud AI solution, it constantly learns from data as we learn from experience, right? So if there's a gap in terms of data, that AI would miss certain things, right? But if it's constantly running, it's always got the predictability. It's never missing something. So it always makes the right decision because it's all got all the data.
You know, you're shooting the right points, and it's quite interesting. Tell me about GPUs. Will Stratos be able to have the right set of super GPU power? Right? You know, these days GPUs is like, wow, the amount of processing it can take per second to live up to the expectations on the number of attacks per second, you know, false positive or not, considering that your data is synchronized and always on. You know, tell me about that.
So remember, Penguin actually does and have played in AI for over 20 years, right? We do build AI systems. But on the fault tolerance side, there would also be inference at the edge, right? So on the future roadmaps, we're also looking to put GPUs down on the endurance systems, which also then gives you the ability to do inference on the edge, which means that you've got fault tolerance on your inference at the edge on the AI systems, which then expands the possibility. But if you look at fraud and you look at cyber security, the attackers are using methods with AI, automating the attacks. So how would you be preventing that? You should fight back with AI, your AI, right? But again, it comes down to uptime, right?
Great stuff. And you know, while I was opening, I talked about the perpetual battle between good and evil.
Yes.
And you just talked about that you attack with AI and respond with AI. And I think Andrew just made a fantastic comment, which is it should be a happy moment for you, saying that the fault tolerance systems having GPUs, right? Meaning that, again, you talked about the total cost of ownership, meaning that you don't really need to spend so much in putting your fraud prevention systems on a different system and putting your transaction processing system on a different system. Penguin Solutions got you. So I think this is some good information that Andrew said. And then again, wrapping up, right, you know, we're having quite an interesting conversation. I've quite learned a lot. But I'd ask you, right, collaboration is often overlooked. So everyone tries to hide information just to be like the good guy, right? No one wants to admit to being punched in the face coincidentally, right? You clean up and run your makeup. So tell me, how important is partnership between banks, fintechs, regulators, OEMs? create creating a united front against fraudsters? Tell me.
It's very important because first and foremost, we're all in this together, right? When it comes to fraud, it goes beyond just whatever institution it is that maybe you transact with, maybe via banks and all that. It goes to the point where organizations need to safeguard their reputation, and also there has to be support in terms of information sharing between banks. Of course, I know that's already being done, right? We already have, let me just say, agencies that are working on in terms of being able to create or being able to enhance platforms across different institutions where you can share information around trends that you're seeing, or where it gets even busier to track whatever funds it is that is lost across the bank or across the financial institution network. So the importance of that collaboration is so key in being able to reduce fraud. We need information, and it's something that's at the end of the day, I mean, nobody wants to see the other party suffer losses. And then we need to go beyond the competitive mindset, right? I mean, it's okay to be competitive, but at the end of the day, you need to compete based on quality of whatever product or services that you're offering, and not based on information that you have about how to prevent fraud, because you feel like if fraud gets perpetrated elsewhere, it dents to your competitor's reputation, bolsters your own reputation. That's not how it should be. It should be something that we'll have to unite on all fronts,
Yeah.
just to try and minimize things.
Gentlemen, thank you for your insights. I learned quite a lot of things, and I hope the people listening to us can learn one or two things based on this conversation. Fraudsters may be relentless, right? But with robust fraud solutions like the Interswitch Security as a Service and resilient infrastructure like DT Series or FT Series by Penguin Solutions, businesses and individuals likewise can stay one head above the fraudsters. And I hope that this conversation has been quite engaging. Follow us on the chat and wait for the next episode. See you. Bye-bye.